In this video, I'm going to show how you can build a custom store locator in Bubble and be able to display information about location in a pop-up when you click on one of the markers. I'm also going to show how you can display the relevant info in the store list section on the left-hand side and even zoom into a specific store when you click on that entry. Finally, we'll go through how you can display markers in different geographical areas and be brought to those areas once you enter a value into the search box like we've done here. And once again, you can click on a specific store and see some information about it. Throughout this tutorial, we're going to be using Mapbox. Mapbox is a service that makes it really easy to add beautiful maps to your application. It is a paid service, but I have a pretty generous free tier. And once you've signed up, you're going to have access to this dashboard area. And this section down here, the access token section, is quite important because even though we've signed up for a Mapbox account, we now need a way for Mapbox to talk to our Bubble app. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to install a plugin. And the plugin we're looking to install is a Beautiful Maps Mapbox plugin. This is a paid plugin I developed myself. You can see there, Grant for Tech. It comes with an extensive demo page and instructions on how to use it. So in order to get Mapbox talking to our Bubble app, we're going to create a new access token. So I'm going to call this Store Locator Demo. And then really importantly, before clicking on Create Token, I want to limit this token's usage to the specific URL that I'm going to be using for my store locator. So if I go to Preview here, you'll see here we have our address. And what I want to do is I want to take everything from this part of the URL and I want to paste it into this section here. I want to add the URL, and now the token is only going to be able to be used on this specific web page. Okay, let's create our token. And I just need to put in my password. And you'll see here I have a couple of other tokens as well. I'm going to change these by the time this video comes out. But I'm now going to copy my store locator demo token. I'm going to go back to my plugin section, and I'm going down to here, and I'm going to go down here to the token dev and token fields, and I'm going to paste in my access token. At the moment, because I pasted into the dev field, it's going to work on test mode. But when I deploy to production, I'm also going to need to paste the exact same token into the token field. Now that we've installed the beautiful Mapbox plugin, we should have access to a new element in our Bubble editor. You can see here in the Design tab, under Visual Elements, we have this Mapbox map element, and I'm going to drop that on my page in just a second. But before I do that, just a brief bit of formatting. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the layout of my index page to a column. I'm going to change the default width to 1200 and set the minimum height as 1000 for now. Then I'm going to get a group and I'm going to drop it onto my canvas. I'm going to call this group main container, and I'm going to set this to be a row. I'm going to untick the fixed width. I'm going to set the min width as 300, leave the max width unbounded, and then set the min height as 500, but I'm also going to untick this fit height to content, so it's going to take up the full page. And then finally, before I drop my Mapbox map element onto the container, I'm going to change the standard group style here, and I'm just going to give it a flat color, and we're going to leave that as white. So you can see here we now have this white group container. We're going to take our Mapbox map element and just drop it in here. Let's see how this looks. So if we click on Preview, we're brought to our page, and you can see here we have the beginnings of a map. It certainly doesn't look anything like a store locator just yet, but we can move around, we can zoom in on specific areas. So we do have the beginnings of our app here, but obviously a lot more work to do yet. We're going to come back to the Design tab of our Bubble editor in just a bit, but now I want to look at our database setup. Because what we need to do is we need to create a data type that will represent each store location on our Mapbox map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new data type, and I'm going to call it location. I'm going to create a number of custom fields for this data type. The first one I'm going to put in is address, and this is going to be a geographic address. We're going to create that, and then we're also going to create a longitude field, which is going to be a number, and a latitude field, which also, unsurprisingly, is a number. So longitude and latitude are essentially the geographical coordinates that represent each location. So as I'll show in a minute, you can kind of substitute either address for latitude and longitude or vice versa, but I think it's good practice to have both of them, and I'll show you exactly why in just a couple of minutes when we're uploading locations. I'm going to add in 3 more fields. The first one is image, which will just be an image used to represent each Starbucks store. So we'll go down here to image, click create. And then the next one I'm going to add in is opening time. And I'm going to set that to be a text value. And then similarly, I'm going to set closing time to also be a text value. You could use numbers here, but just for ease of formatting, like I'm going to show in a bit, I prefer to use text for these specific ones. So the next thing I want to do is we need to represent all the Starbucks locations on our map using markers. But in order to do that, we need to create a bunch of locations in our database. You can see here the locations is currently empty. So what I could do is I could go to new entry and I could manually add, the Starbucks locations that I want to, but that's a bit clunky and I don't really want to go through all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new page. I'm going to call it admin panel. I'm not going to clone it from anything. And we're going to use this page to create a sort of location uploader. Again, I'm going to change my container layout to be a column. I'm going to change the default width to 1200. Don't need to change the min height just yet. And then once again, I'm going to add in a group. We'll put that in there. Once again, we'll call it a column. Do some basic formatting just like we did on our main page. I'm also going to put in some paddings on this one. And then I can start dropping elements in. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a text element, and I'm going to call this address. We'll do some quick changes to formatting here as well, and that should be fine. We will make this heading 6. And then we're going to get a search box. And if we scroll down here, we'll see that search box is an option quite near the bottom of our list of elements. And what we're going to use this for is we're going to use this to search for specific locations. You can see at the moment we're using dynamic choices, placeholder, start typing. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change this to geographic places. And I'm just going to preview this for a second to show you what exactly it does. And what's going to happen is if I start typing in for a location, so let's say I put in Paris, you'll see here nothing's quite coming up at the moment. I was expecting a bit of a drop down of geographic places to pop up, and I can just see in our console here we're seeing an error. And what's happening here is we exceeded the limit of a certain amount of Google Geocode API calls per minute. So what we need to do is we need to go to the settings tab of our bubble editor. We need to go to general, and we need to fill out these 2 API keys here, the Geocode API and the Google Map API key. This is because the search box element, if we're searching for geographic places, it relies on Google's APIs to work properly. Now you can see here there's pretty detailed instructions on how to get both of these API keys. So I'm not going to go through it in detail in this tutorial. There's other tutorials out there, and there's also this handy bubble tutorial video on what you need to do. So I'm just going to put these keys in, and then I'm going to go back to my design tab. Okay, so both of those API keys are in. I'm just going to refresh my preview page. And this time, if I start searching for Paris, you'll see here we get a bunch of locations that we can select. So let's choose Paris Beauvais Airport. Okay, so we now have a geographic address inside there. I'm going to take this search box element and I'm going to change the format of it slightly. Again, we're not going to make it fixed width. We'll set a max width of 500 and a min width of 300. We will give it a fixed height of, let's say, 50. I think that should be adequate. And then I'm going to take the text element along with the search box element. I'm going to group elements in a row container. I'm going to take the search box. I'm going to take the text element. I'm going to right click on group elements, and then go to column container. And then what I can do is I can change the gap spacing between elements here. I'm going to give it a gap spacing of 10. Then I can rename this group address, and simply copy it down a couple of times. Let's do 3 times for now. And we have 3 similar-ish looking groups. I'm then going to click on group A, which is the kind of master container on this page. And again, apply gap spacing between elements. And this time I'm going to go with 30. So we have a bit of a gap between each element in each group, and then also a slightly bigger gap between the groups themselves. I'm going to change this text element here to opening time. And I'm going to change this search box. Rather than have a search box here, I'm going to go to replace the element type, and we're simply going to replace it with input. We'll replace that so the user is going to be able to type in whatever value they want. And then we're going to do a very similar thing for this third group here. I'm going to change that to opening time. Once again, we're going to replace the element type and leave it as an input. Okay, so we nearly have enough inputs that we can, and I realize now I need to change this to closing time, so let's do that very quickly. We nearly have enough inputs so we can create a location in our database. So we're not fully there, but I think it's a good time to kind of demo what this functionality is going to look like. So let's click there, add a button, and I'm going to simply call this add location. And let's just rename our elements very quickly so we know exactly what each is representing. So search box A, I'm just going to call this search box address. Opening time, I'm going to call input opening time. And then finally input B is going to be renamed to input closing time. And what I'm going to do is every time the add location button is clicked, I'm going to create a new thing. The new thing I'm going to create is a location. And we can add 3 fields for it at the moment. The first we can do is the address, and we can simply go here and we can go down to search box address and get its value. You can see there that's going to evaluate to a geographic address, which is exactly what we want. And then what we can also do is we can do opening time equals input opening times value, and closing time equals input, and we can even search for this, input closing times value. Our 3 values there. So let's just test this out. And what I should do at this stage is I'm going to bring up a list of Starbucks that are in New York. And you can see here that we have a couple of different locations. We have a bunch on this area of the map here. So let's take a few of these and put in their addresses. So you can see the very first one there is Starbucks 1500 Broadway. So let's click on that one first of all. And we have the exact address here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Bubble app. I'm going to refresh it. And I'm going to type in 1500 Broadway. And you can see there it's coming in straight away. And let's just take a look at the opening time. I know this is demo purposes, so it doesn't really matter. And it's 5:30 a.m. to 12 a.m. So quite lengthy opening hours. So let's go to 0530 and closing time. I'm just going to put in maybe 2300 for now. And let's add that location. Okay, it doesn't look as though anything has happened, but if we go back into the data tab of our Bubble app, you can see here we now have this location, and we have the address with the closing time, the opening time. We do not have 3 of the other fields though. We don't have the image, we don't have the latitude, and we don't have a longitude. And the other thing that's kind of bugging me is these values are still appearing even though we've submitted the location. We probably want these to refresh and not show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my design tab. I'm going to go to edit workflow, and I'm going to go to reset relevant inputs. This means next time I add a location, these values will vanish after I click that button. But the other thing I want to do is I want to fill out these longitude and latitude fields. And it's actually really easy to fill these out, because what we can do is when we're adding the location, if we click on edit workflow, what we can do for, say, longitude is we can say it equals the search box, its address, its value, and then you'll see we have a bunch of other options down here, 2 of which are latitude and longitude. So we can simply click on longitude and we'll get the longitude value coming in there. And let's do the same thing for latitude. So we'll do latitude equals search box address, its value, and this time we'll go for latitude. The other value we want to fill out is an image for each store. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a image uploader, or picture uploader as it's also known. So we'll click on that, we'll put that there. We're going to make it last. And what might be easier actually is if we copy a group down. So this one, paste that in. And then instead of having an input value, we'll grab that. And we can't fit it in there at the moment, but if we cut this and then go into our group, and then we paste that, we'll get our image uploader. We can get rid of the input and we can change this to image. We'll call this picture uploader store image. and then we'll change this to make it go up there. And then finally, when we're adding our location, we can add the image to be equal to picture uploader store image, its value. Okay, let's refresh our Bubble app and start uploading our locations. I'm going to delete the existing location in our Bubble database just so everything's nice and clean and has all the data that we need. And I'm going to add this exact same Starbucks again, this one here that's available at 1500 Broadway in New York. So once again, I'm going to type in the address and I'm going to put in 1500 Broadway, New York. I'm going to put the opening time as 07:30, closing time as 2300 hours. And then for the image, I'm just going to grab the image from here. And I've downloaded that image. So if I go back here and click on my downloads, and I can just grab this one here and drop it in our image uploader. You'll see it shows up there. And then we can add location. So let's click on that. And you can see there all our inputs have reset. And if we go back into our Bubble database, we can see now we have all the fields we wanted filled out. So we can see the image is there, the opening time is there, the closing time is there, the address is there, and then importantly, the latitude is there and the longitude is there. So again, thanks to Bubble's inbuilt functionality, we can extract these latitude and longitude fields from the geographic address and save it down to our database. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a bunch more of these locations and just add them to my database. This is pretty boring, so I'm not going to make you watch all that. So I'm going to skip through it, and then at the end we'll have our various locations. Okay, I've just added my 10th Starbucks location in New York, and if we go into our database, we can see all of them laid out there quite neatly. And we can now use these to put markers on our Mapbox map. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our index page, and let's just have a quick reminder of what this is like at the moment. So let's go to preview. And we can see here at the moment, there's a couple of things wrong apart from the obvious layout issues. But the first thing is that the map by default is showing over the kind of UK Ireland area. And that's because at the moment I've set the default longitude and latitude to be equal to these values. So what we want to do is, first of all, we want this to show a bit more over the New York area because that's where the focus of our store locator is going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find one of the Starbucks locations in my database, and I can see here that the longitude is roughly -73 and the latitude is about 40. So I'm going to use those two values and use that as my default. So let's go back. We're going to go here to our latitude and set that as 40. And we're going to set our longitude here as -73. Let's take a quick look and see what area we're starting over at the moment. And okay, that looks a lot better, but we're pretty far out. And because we want to hone in on the New York area, I'm going to set the zoom level to be a lot higher. I'm going to start off by putting it to 12, and we'll see how that looks. Okay, a bit better, but we're looking at the sea at the moment for some reason. We're not too far away from New York. For whatever reason, the longitude and latitude value I put in obviously wasn't precise enough. So let's go back and let's do -73.99 and 40.66. Sorry, 40.76 I should say. Yeah, 40.76. And then 73.99. We'll leave the zoom value as 12 for now, and let's refresh. And okay, that's more like it. This is the general area that we want to have an overview of all the stores in. So now that we have this kind of general overview of, the New York area here, what we can do is we can go to the workflow tab of our Bubble editor. We can click here to add an event, and we're going to use this page is loaded action. So we're going to trigger a workflow action whenever the page is loaded. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to element actions, and you'll see here we have under Mapbox maps a bunch of actions we can do, but the one we want is add a list of markers to a Mapbox map. So this is going to be to define how we show markers on our store locator. And you can see here there's a number of fields that we need to fill in. The first one is the longitudes, and if we read the documentation here, it's going to be a list of the longitude coordinates. So we have these saved down in our database. You can see here most of them are kind of around the 73.9/74 level. So what we can do is we can go to do a search for locations. And what we want is we want each item's longitude. Now, some of you may ask, why did we need to save down the actual latitude and longitude values? Because what you could have done is you could have done a search for locations again, and you could have simply gotten each item's address and then got the longitude value from that. Now you can do that, there's nothing wrong with it, but one thing I'll say is this function here where you extract the longitude from the address, it's reliant on the Google API. So you might remember earlier on in the tutorial I demonstrated that you will need to put in your Google API keys. So by saving down the longitude and latitude, we basically get around that. We don't need to use the Google API every single time, which I just think is more efficient. So we're going to go back to the first method we did, which is do a search for locations, and we're going to get each item's longitude. We're going to do the exact same thing for latitudes. We're going to go do a search for location, and we're going to get each item's latitude. There's a couple of other fields here. We are going to fill them out later on, but for now, let's just see what our map looks like. Okay, so we can see this is pretty promising here. We have a bunch of different locations showing up on the map. I think it might actually be better if we zoom in even one more level. So let's change the zoom there on the map to 13. And what we can do as well maybe is instead of getting the longitude and latitude and pasting them in, what we could do is we could do a search for the location and get the very first item in our database and get its longitude. And then similarly, we could do a search for locations and get the first item's latitude. So we're just honing on the very first item in our database, its coordinates, and using that to center our view. Okay, that looks quite good there, I think. We have our various locations. Now, a couple of limitations. Nothing's happening when we click on it. We're not getting any kind of details on it. I prefer to have a more custom icon, but not a bad start. But what I'm actually going to work on next is I want to fill out a side section here with a list of all the stores. I think we might actually display this list of the stores on the left-hand side, but let's get our layout right first of all. So if we go back to our index page and look at what we have at the moment, we have the group main container and we have our Mapbox map. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in two more groups in this. So this one here is going to be called group store list, and I'm going to make this the first item on the page. In our row container is now showing up on the left hand side. I'm going to change the container layout to be a column, and for width dimensions I'm going to make it a fixed width, but I'm going to change this from being 365 pixels to 30%. So it's going to take up roughly 30% of the canvas. And then I'm going to give this a background color just to distinguish it. So we can change there the color. Let's give it a bit of a gray color for now. And that's like that. And then I'm going to copy this element, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to put it back in the main container. And we now have two of these groups next to each other. I'm going to call this second group, group map. And I'm going to make that 70% of the canvas. And let me just change the appearance of this one as well. Make that a slightly more ready one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Mapbox map and I'm actually going to drop it into this container group here. So if we do that, it's not quite going to fit. So what I can do is I can do cut and then paste it in there. And you can see here the Mapbox map is nearly taking up the full dimensions of its group, but not quite. And we're going to change that in a second. But before we do, I'm actually going to go back to my page index and I'm going to change the layout here to be equal to 500. Then I'm going to take the group main container, which is the kind of parent group of this group and this group, and I'm going to make it take up 100% of the parent container. And then finally, we'll do the same thing on the height dimensions for both of our other groups. We'll change this to 100, change that to a percentage, and make it a fixed height. And we'll do the exact same thing for this one here, percentage, 100. And then what we can do is we can make this, and I'm going to put that on a fixed height as well, which I believe we did on the first group. Yeah. And then we can make our Mapbox map, I should say. We'll set the min height there, but we'll untick that fit height to content, and we'll also untick that there, and we will simply put it, actually I should put it as a fixed width, but just have it as 100% again. Perfect. And then last thing I want to do is I want to change the background color back to being white. So we'll go back here, and we'll do the very same thing for our other group map. I just want to make sure the marker workflow is still there. You can see there because I cut the map from down here into the group that's after disappearing. So what I'll do is I'll recreate that workflow. When page is loaded, we want to go to element actions, add a list of markers to a Mapbox map. We want to do a search for locations, longitudes, each item's longitude, I should say. Do the same thing for latitudes, do a search for locations, each item's latitude, and we should be good to go. So let's see how this is going to look now. Okay, this is promising. Our map is loading. We have this area on the left-hand side, and we also have these markers showing up as well. Something you might see on a Google Maps or a store locator on a company's website. Now let's go about filling out this area of our page. So let's go back to here. I'm going to put in some paddings here. So I'm going to put in 15, 15, 15, and 15, just give it a bit of space. And then I'm going to put in a group at the top, which is just going to be a kind of section header. So I'm going to put in here, we're going to call this section header, change that to be a column, untick that, put the min width to be 200 maybe, and min height, let's make that a bit bigger. We'll put it at say 150, might change that in a bit. And then I'm going to drop a text element in here, and this is just going to be called find a Starbucks. We're going to use our own custom style here, so I'm going to change the font to be something more like, let's go with that. We're going to go with a nice green color. Could get the official Starbucks green with a bit of work, but for now, let's just go with that. Maybe a bit darker there. Yeah. We're going to increase the weight on it, and we're also going to increase the font size to 24. Not 124, just 24. And then we will untick the fixed width, so we can take up the full space, untick the min height, and we should have that looking okay. And then what we'll do is we're actually going to leave that for now, and we're going to add in a repeating group down here. So we'll put in a repeating group, and you can see here at the moment its cells container layout is fixed. We're going to change that to column. We're again going to untick the fixed width, set the min width to be 150, min height, we do not need that, and we'll untick that fit height to content. If we go back to our appearance, we do not want a fixed number of rows. However, we do want a fixed number of columns, just to be one. And the type of content inside here is going to be a location. And the data source at the moment is simply going to be do a search for locations, and we're going to pull in every single location. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get rid of just kind of the gray areas at the very side of this particular repeating group. So we're going to go to borders, and we're going to go to define each one independently. And we may not actually need any, so let's just change this to none at the moment. And yeah, you can see here we have these kind of gray lines in between each item, which I do want, but I don't want anything at the side. And I might have made a mistake in my original formatting because I'd like these gray separators to take up the full width of the container, but they're not at the moment because I have these paddings inside here. So what I might do is I might reset these to go to 0. And then what I could do is I could put the paddings in the two groups themselves. So let's do that and see how it looks. 15. And then similarly, in the repeating group itself, what we could do is we could put in left, right. And even that won't actually quite work. So we'll have to delete that. But what we can do is we can actually put a group element in each of the repeating group cells and then put the padding on that once we change it to a column. So let's do that, 15, 15, 15, and 15. And let's let this group, which we're going to call group location, it can take up the full width and height of each particular cell of the repeating group. We'll set the min height there to be 50. Okay, let's take a quick look and see how we're looking. Yep, that looks exactly what we want. I'm conscious this is taking up quite a bit of space up here at the moment, so let's just set the min height on that at the moment to be 150. Sorry, the min height on this to be 0, I should say. And then let's start dropping text elements into our repeating group here. So we're going to go back up to text, we'll grab this here, and we're simply going to call the first one Starbucks. We're going to untick the fixed width, unset the min height, go back to appearance, and we're going to change our font here to Open Sans, and we'll change the weighting on this. Maybe we can actually just change the header there to be, yeah, let's put it as heading 6. I think that works quite well. And then what we can do is we can copy this, we can paste it down, And what we can do is we can change this. Instead of being a heading, we can just put it as body. And rather than having Starbucks in there, we can get the parent groups thing, which should be a location, but I realize now I haven't set it. So let's just undo that for a second. And let's go back to our group location. So maybe a good time to look at the elements in our element tree. We have this group store list. We repeating group location, and you can see your group location is just underneath repeating group. And then we have our text elements within that. But what I realized I forgot to do is I forgot to set the type of content on the group location to equal location and simply get in the current cell's location. Then what we can do is we can go back to this text element, and instead of having Starbucks in there, we can put in the address. And what we can do is we can go to parent groups locations, address, and we'll leave it like that for now. We'll do a bit of formatting in a second, but let's just take a quick look and see how that is. Okay, so it's not bad. We have our 10 locations here. We can scroll down and see them. We're getting a full lengthy address, which I don't really think we need. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to extract the relevant parts of this address. I also don't like that there's kind of no gap between here and it's not evenly spaced. So what I'm going to do first of all is within this group here, group location, I'm going to apply some gap spacing between the elements, and I'm just going to set it to 10, not too much. And then what we can also do is we can change the min height on this to 0. And if we go to the repeating group section and go to appearance here, we don't need a min height of 100 really on that. What we could do is we could just set a min height to be 50, although that's actually not enough. So let's just change that to 75. Maybe 100 was ideal actually. And then what we could do is we could go back here and go to layout. Yeah, and we could just align that in the center. So let's take a quick look. Yeah, I much prefer that, much more evenly centered. Okay, now let's work on extracting out the relevant part of the addresses. I don't think we really need to have USA at the end of this. So what we can do is we can go back to here, and rather than having the full address, what we can do is we can go to more. We can go to extract, and we can simply get, first of all, maybe the street number. We can add in the same thing again after a space. So if we do parent groups locations, address, extract, and then we get the street. What we should see now is just the street number and the street. So yeah, 1500 Broadway. And then what we could do at the very end, we could add in a comma and put in again, parent groups locations, address, extract, and this time go with the city. And then finally, let's go with the zip code. So again, parent groups locations, address, let's extract the zip code. And I think that should be sufficient for our store locator. Yeah, I like the look of that at the moment. What we're going to do next is, before we get into linking each of these locations here to an icon on the map, we're going to want to display some content in a pop-up when an icon is clicked on. You can see at the moment when I click on one of these, nothing happens, which isn't really the behavior that you'd expect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my workflow, and when the page is loaded, we're adding a list of markers to the map. And you can see here we have this field called pop-up content. And what we can do is we can add something in here that'll show in each of the pop-ups that'll be displayed when an icon is clicked. So what we can do is go do a search for locations, and then if we go down here, what we could do, for example, is in this, put in each item's address and leave it like that. This actually isn't going to work, and I'm going to show you why in a second. I also don't like how far away that map is. Maybe another thing we could do is just increase the zoom by 1 more. And let's refresh. Yeah, that's much better. And what we could do is if we click on an icon now, we're getting a pop-up, but it's not really anything legible or meaningful. And the reason that's happening is just because of the way the pop-up content works. It doesn't like the geographical address. But what we can do is if we go here and we go to more, we can go to each item's formatted address. And if we try that and refresh our page and then click on an icon, you can see here we now get the address for every single Starbucks on our map. So that's quite useful. Another thing I don't like now that I just refreshed this page is it feels like we have kind of a concentration down in this area. whereas we're starting up here. So maybe I should focus in more on, for example, this particular address. So let's take the longitude and latitudes here for 525 7th Avenue. If we go into our database and take a look at our locations, we can see that's this one here. And we have a latitude of 40.75, and we can copy the exact one. Let's go back to our design, paste that in. And then for its latitude, we have, looks like 73.99. Copy that, go back in here, and let's refresh our app. Oh dear, not quite what we want. Looks like we're looking over some mountain areas, so maybe I got the app, I didn't put in the 0. That will be it. Yeah, put in the 0 before this. We should be back to our New York Starbucks rather than some mountain somewhere else in the world. And yeah, that's a lot better. And we're clicking on this and we're starting to get it to be a lot more like an actual store locator. So we can get more advanced with the styling in this. You'll notice on the documentation here for adding pop-up content, we can use HTML to style. That's quite advanced, and I am going to show you how to do something with that, but I'm going to leave it to a later part of the tutorial just because it is a bit more to it, and I want to get on to linking each of these locations to an icon. The very last thing I'm going to do before that is you can use custom icons here. So at the moment we have these kind of red classic location markers, which are fine. But what we can do is if we wanted to use, for example, a Starbucks icon, we could reference that here and we can use that as a custom icon input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Starbucks SVG icon. I do recommend using an SVG file for this kind of thing. Let's go to images and let's take a look at this one. That looks fine. So we will, maybe this one might be a bit better actually. Yeah. So we're going to save this image as Starbucks SVG icon. That'll go to our downloads. We can go back to our database, and what you could do is you could create a brand new data type called icon, upload it there, but that's not really what we want. What I think is an easier way here is to use an option set. And I'm going to do this very quickly and just call this option set icon. And then we'll create a new attribute, which is just going to be icon image. It's going to be an image itself. And then we'll create a new option called Starbucks. Create that, modify its attributes, and then we can drop our icon image in there, and we have the saved in our database. And then what we can do is that when we are looking for an icon image, we can insert dynamic data, we can get an option, we can choose Starbucks, and we can choose its icon image. And hopefully now when we refresh our map, instead of having these red markers, we're going to have these Starbucks icons, which are quite nice, I think. And again, we can click on that and we get our detail popping up. They're a bit big, might make them a bit smaller to maybe 40 and 40. And yeah, I think I prefer that. Okay, the next thing we want to do finally is link each of these locations to an icon so that when we click on one of these locations, we're going to get taken to the specific point on the map. And what we can use here is if we go back to our design and if we click on the group, we can add a workflow to this so that when the group is clicked, we go down to element actions and we're going to use this fly to location and Mapbox map. So flying is basically zooming over to a specific point on the map, and the longitude is going to be equal to the current cell's location, its longitude, latitude, current cell's location, latitude, and then we'll come back to these pop-up ones in a second. The zoom, I'm going to leave 15. You might remember our default zoom level is 13, so 15 is going to be a bit more. Let's see how that works. Okay, let's click on this group, and you can see here we zoom on this specific Starbucks. We can check its address by clicking on it, and we do the same for all the others. One thing I've noticed there just for these particular icons is that because they're transparent, they're kind of showing the street in the background. So maybe I'll take a different Starbucks icon for my option set. And yeah, let's go with this one instead. Save that down. And then back in our options, we'll clear that one. And we'll just get this one here. Save that. And then if we refresh our application, yeah, I think I prefer that. All right. And then if we click on any one of our Starbucks, yeah, we're getting shown the specific one. So good progress here. What I do want to do is I want to do two things now. The first thing I want to do is I want to put in some sort of hover animation just so that when we hover over one of these groups, it's clear that you can do something. I think the easiest thing to do there is simply go here on the group, go to conditional, define a condition, and we're just going to say when this group is hovered, we're going to change the background color, and we're going to change it from here just ever so slightly down to there. Let's see how that looks. Yep, I think that works. I do like sometimes using this selector property to define a new transition, and I think it's a background style here we want, or maybe color. Yeah, background style. And I'm just going to leave that so the transition just takes a bit more time. And I think that's quite nice. That's quite a nice effect just there. Okay, when we're flying to a location, you'll see here we have the options to show a pop-up and show pop-up content. If we read this, if we set this to yes, then a pop-up will automatically be displayed when we fly to a location. So let's try that first of all. And you can see we're getting a pop-up, but there is nothing in it, which obviously isn't ideal. So what we can do, much like we did when we were initially adding markers to the page, is we can just get the formatted address of the current cell's location. So current cell's location, address, formatted address. Formatted address, and let's refresh our page. And now if we click on any one of our locations, we get zoomed into it and we get displayed the address, which is quite useful. So that's how you display some information in the pop-up, but we have a ton of more information in our database that might be useful to display in a pop-up. So for example, we have this image that we could display, we have the opening time, and we have the closing time. And I also don't like displaying the full address. I'd rather kind of just show, much like we did when we were initially loading the markers, just a portion of it. So we can do this. I'm not going to lie, this does veer into kind of low-code territory, but I think it's worth going over. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a dynamic set of data that we can load into each pop-up. You'll see at the moment we're getting each item's address, but in order to get more information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a hidden group in each cell of our repeating group. So I'm going to drop this group element in here, and I'm going to call this group hidden info. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a type of content here to be equal to a text. And then the data source for this particular group is going to be arbitrary text. And the reason I'm using arbitrary text is we can put in whatever we want. We can get dynamic data from this current cell's location. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to start off by putting in Starbucks here. And then I'm going to say opening hours, opening time maybe, being equal to the current parent group's location's opening time. We'll say closing time, parent group's location, closing time. And we'll just leave it like that for now. So we have this data in one of our repeating group cells. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this really small. So I'm going to make it, let's just say make it a column, and we're just going to set it to 1 and 1. So it's pretty much not visible at all. Now, what I'd like to be able to do is just load up that arbitrary text in our pop-up content here. So ideally what I'd be able to do is find repeating group locations and then get the hidden group within that, but we just can't do that. That's not a functionality that comes in Bubble, but we do have a bit of a workaround. So what we can do, and I'm just going to clear this expression for now, is install a plugin. And the plugin I'm going to install is the Repeating Group Tools BDK plugin. I've used this a number of times. I found it super useful. So I'm just going to subscribe to that there. And once we've installed that plugin, we've access to two elements here. We've access to the RG data element and also the RG extractor element. I'm going to take this org extractor element and also drop it in the cell of my repeating group. And you'll see here there's a number of fields that we need to fill out. The first thing we're going to fill out is the extractor name. You can give this whatever name you want. We're going to need to input the exact same name in a second on the org data element, but I'm just going to call this location data. For cell index, this is super simple. You just need to set this to the current cell's index. And then for column 1, this represents the data that we want to get out of the repeating group and have access to elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to group hidden infos text. So therefore, we're taking the information that we've put in that hidden group and we're putting it in this column 1 field here. And if we want to access this outside of the repeating group in our workflow, what we need to do is drop the org data element. I'm just going to drop it up here. You can drop it anywhere on the page. And this is why the name is important. We need to give this exactly the same name as we did for the other element. So you can see location info there and location data there. So I was not giving it the same name. So let's go back and change that to data. And then column 1 type, you need to choose a type of data that we're going to be extracting. In my case, we set the data over here to be equal to a text. So therefore, we need to match that up here and also set that to be a text. Limit to max, we need to set this to be equal to the number of items that are in the repeating group. So thankfully, again, this is quite simple. We can just go down here to repeating group locations, list of locations, and count, and that'll fill that out for us. But the nice thing now is what we can do is we can say when we're adding a list of markers to the Mapbox, we can go down and we can find our org data A element, and we can get column 1 list, and suddenly we have a list of texts. So let's see how this looks. I'm not expecting this to work straight away because there's one more thing we need to do. But let's click on one of our elements and you can see they're undefined, so nothing's quite coming through. And the reason for that is by the time the map has loaded, this org extractor hasn't actually had a chance to run. So this takes some time to pull out the data from the repeating group. And if we run this workflow action here of adding a list of markers to the map before that calculation has completed, then this data here is not going to have a chance to actually have been calculated. So what I'm going to do here is just add in a brief pause before the next action. I'm just going to set this to 2000 milliseconds at the start. So hopefully I will refresh our page. We'll see a pause, we'll see the markers appear, and then if we click on it, you can see here we have our custom data in there. This is a step in the right direction, but it's obviously not ideal yet. But what we can do, and this is where we're kind of veering into low-code territory, is we can use some HTML tags on our arbitrary text in order to style it in a way that looks a bit better. So because I've put this as a hidden group, I'm going to have to try and dig down and find it. I can also make this a lot smaller so it's not taking up any space. And if we go into store list and then repeating group location, yeah, you'll see you have our org extractor there. And we also have our group hidden info here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the arbitrary text here, and you will need some familiarity with HTML in order for this to work, but it's quite simple. Don't be afraid of using a small bit of code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in this symbol here. I'm going to put in H1. I'm going to put that there, put in a slash H1 to close that tag. And now let's refresh and see how that looks. Again, we wait, we have our pause, our markers pop up. And now you see we have Starbucks on the top, and then opening time and closing time on the next line. So ideally what we'd like is maybe to have Starbucks have a bit of styling on it, maybe like a bold or a slightly higher size font. And then we'd like to have opening time, closing time on 2 separate lines. And then let's try and get our image in down the bottom as well. So let's go back to our editor and focus on styling the Starbucks title in the pop-up first of all. And what we can do is we can grab an HTML element and we can drop this anywhere on our canvas. I'm going to again drop it up in the section header up here. I'm going to again set it to be a very small width and height. In fact, we can probably make this 0 and make it disappear completely if we tick both of them. And then what we can do is we can apply some styling tags here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the tag, put in style, and then we'll close it down the bottom. And what we're going to do is if we just Google how to style H1 tags, you'll see here we get an example of how to apply some CSS to style a H1 tag. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to go back to my bubble editor and I'm going to paste that in the HTML section there. I don't really need much changed apart from the font weight, so I'm just going to delete all this and one more. And then if we refresh our page, what we'll hopefully see once we click on a location is, yeah, the Starbucks title is now in bold. Okay, so that's step one. The next thing we want to do is try and get the opening time and the closing time onto two different lines. And this is pretty simple to do. All we need to do is go back to our hidden info group, look at our arbitrary text, and I'm just going to apply some other tags here. So I'm going to open this up, put in a P, and then close that tag at the end of it. I'm going to do the same thing for closing time. So we'll put that in there, and then close our tag at the very end. And if we refresh, we'll hopefully now see once our markers have loaded, just need to refresh one more time, that opening time and closing time on different lines. So the last thing we want to do is try and add an image just below here so people get a sense of what the copy shop looks like. And maybe before that, actually, I'm just thinking it might be nice to include the address in there as well. So what I might do is put that just below the Starbucks sign there. So what we can do is, once again, put in that tag and we'll close it. Then what we can do is we can put in parent group's locations address, and we're just going to extract, first of all, the street number. We'll close that, and then we'll also put in parent group's locations address, extract the street itself. And I think what we did then was we put in a comma, and then parent group's location address, extract neighborhood, and then finally the zip code just to finish it off. So again, we'll put in one more comma here, a space, and then parent group's locations, address, extract, and if we go down here, we can get the zip code. So let's refresh, and then just before we add in our image, we'll see what it looks like. Okay, I must have missed a step there. You can see there's no space between the number and the actual street, and then we're missing something in the middle of that one there. So let's fix both those things very quickly. So go back here. First of all, we want something in between the street number and between the exact street. So yeah, put that space in. And that should solve that. Yeah. And then what was the gap in the middle? It looks like neighborhood doesn't seem to be anything valid. So let's change that to city. And then refresh. And if we click on that, that's looking a lot better. 1046 Avenue, New York. Opening time, closing time, and finally we can put our images in. And the way we're going to put our images in is, if we just look at this link here, it gives a pretty good explanation on how to actually insert an image using HTML. You'll see we need to open up this tag here, put in a link under the src kind of parameter, and then close it off. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to copy this, go back to our arbitrary text in our group hidden info, paste that in, and of course we're going to want to make some changes here. First of all, I'm going to change the source to be equal to parent group's locations image, and then really importantly, you must put in URL here. And then the alt text, so that's just the text that's displayed if the image isn't loaded. What I might just put in here is, say, Starbucks location. And we'll leave the width like that for a moment. We are going to change that, and I'm going to refresh. But let's just click on this. But you can see here that it's much too big. So again, that's where we're going to need to change the width and the height. And I don't think we need to change the height so much, at least not yet. But what we can do is we can just change this, rather than being 500, let's just put it at 100%. So it's taking up all of the container. And let's click on this now. Yeah, and you can see there, that's much more like what we would like to see. You can see the height on some of them depending on the size of the image. it doesn't fit in perfectly. So that's probably something you need to fix with the size of the image itself. Now, just before moving on to the very last section of this tutorial, I can see here the spacing in our group location has become a bit messed up. And I'm guessing that's because of the RG extractor element that we've dropped inside there. So let's just fix that quickly. And we can see here we have that. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this element and just drop it outside of the group itself. Let's just take a look and see how that looks. Yeah, that's a bit better there, more evenly spaced. So the very last thing I want to do is, at the moment, all of our locations are in New York, which is fine because that's where the focus of this tutorial has been. But let's say we had a location in London, and I'm going to do that very quickly now. We just go back to our admin panel, and let's add in a location in London this time. And we'll just do a quick search for Starbucks in London. And you can see we have a bunch here, so let's just go with a few of these. And we'll take that address there. So now that we've added that London location inside in our database, and you can see it's added a couple of extra ones in accidentally, but now that that's in there, let's refresh our app on the actual store locator. And again, we need to get rid of that debug mode, just so everything shows up. Okay, so you can see here that we have all our markers for New York, and if we scroll down, we're getting London right at the end here. And if we click on London, we are going to zoom all the way over to the London one, which is what we want. But at the same time, I don't like the way that at the moment we still have all the New York locations showing up first here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to need to dynamically change the ordering of this repeating group based on some sort of location. We may also want to search for a specific location. I just clicked on the London one there, but if we refresh our application, let's say we start off in New York. I think someone would like the ability to search for a specific location. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine those two outcomes that we want. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to find a search box element again. We've already used this before, but let's drop that in the section header up here. This choice style is going to be a geographic place. I'm going to put that down there. I'm going to do, we will undo fixed width and we'll set a min width of, let's say 200. And we will actually set a max width here. And let's set it equal to the percentage of the container it's in, say 80%. Yeah, I think that works well. Fixed height, we'll put in 50, maybe even 45. And we'll want to put a bit of a gap in between this and this. So again, we can apply gap spacing between elements, and we're going to put in a gap of 15 there. And the reason that's going up so big is because we have this RG data element as well, which we can actually put down to 0, 0. And then if we put the margins on that to minus 15, we will get rid of the top space. And then we can also do the same on the Starbucks element, where we can set the margin there to minus 15. And it's almost as if we don't have that RG element at all. Let's refresh. Okay, so now we can choose location. And let's say that we did want to choose London. Let's click on that. We would want to be brought to the London area. So what we can do is we can, and just before I do that workflow action, I really don't like the default conditioning on the search boxes. So I'm going to detach that style and just remove these three conditions here. That's so when it's hovered, you don't get that blue outline, which I'm just not a fan of. Okay, but now what we want to happen is once we type in London, we want to be brought to the London area of our map. So what we can do is we can go to our workflow tab and we can click here to add an event, and we can do when an input value is changed, and the input value, you see it's automatically going to search box A, just because that's the only element where this is relevant on the page. What we can do is we can go to element actions and we can go to fly to location and Mapbox map. And we want to fly to this search box's value and its longitude. So much like we were doing for the other addresses in our database, we're taking the geographic address in the search box and we're getting its longitude and latitude values. We're going to leave the pop content as no because we're not actually honing in on a specific location here. We're just zooming to the general London area. I'm going to leave the zoom as 15 and the speed is 4. So let's try that out now. Refresh our page. And if we search for London, UK, you can see here we are brought across to London and we can see our one London location. Click on that and we get our address, opening time and closing time, which is exactly what we want. So the last thing we need to do, as I mentioned earlier, is just figure out the ordering of this repeating group, because I don't like that the one London location we have is at the very bottom of this repeating group. So what we can do is, after we fly to a location in the Mapbox map, what we can do is we can type display, and then display list in a repeating group is going to pop up. And what we can do is we can choose relevant repeating group, which is our repeating group location. And the data source can be do a search for location. So much like we are at the moment on the actual repeating group here. I just find that in the element tree. We're finding all the locations, but we're going to add an extra step here. What we're going to say is we're going to sort it by address, and it's going to be distance from this search box's value. And then descending, I'm going to click yes. So let's refresh one more time. And you can see at the moment, so the New York addresses are at the very top of our repeating group. But if we search for London, and we click on that, you can see there it's been refreshed, but for some reason New York is still at the top and London is still at the bottom. And I suspect what's happening there is I should have set descending equals no for that particular parameter. Let's try it one more time. London, UK, click on that, and you can see there we're zooming in on London, and we're also showing the London location at the very top. And then if we go back and we search for New York again, we'll do that. We'll zoom back to New York, and you'll see here we're brought down to a lower part of New York there, which you don't necessarily want. So let's change that to Broadway. I know there was a Starbucks location there. So you go to Broadway Theatre, and you can see there then we're brought up, and all the Starbucks are on that particular part of the map. They go up to first in the list. The London one is the furthest away, so it shows up down the bottom. So just a nice way to display the relevant Starbucks on the left-hand side when we're changing location, and also to change the different locations. So let's say I wanted to go to Paris. There's not going to be any markers. There's not going to be any markers in Paris at the moment. But again, it's a nice way for users to see store locations outside of the default one that you've provided. I'd like to change the style of this map a bit more. At the moment, just zoom out, we have this kind of classic standard map style, but the nice thing about this Mapbox map element is that it comes with a bunch of styles. You can see here we're on streets at the moment. We can also use outdoors. Which I quite like, but the one I actually like the most is dark. So let's look at this, refresh. I just like this. I think the Starbucks icon stand out quite nicely compared to the dark background. So hope this tutorial has been useful. If you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section.